Welcome to self-discoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Their Story Matters right here in Self-Discovery Media. Wisdom.com used to be media. We're all about the wisdom now, and wisdom is going to be shared today by my guest, Ian Hawkins, all the way from the UK. And I'm your host, Sarah Troy. We have quite a journey here to take with you today. Ian has had quite a journey. He said when he was really small, his amazing granny Peg gave him some recordings of stories, and it got him hooked on storytelling. He knew that when he grew up, that's what he wanted to do. So he has. He told stories on the radio and television, as well as big crowds of people who enjoyed what he had to say. One day, he realized that sometimes the stories people tell themselves make them unhappy. Then he thought that if I understood how to change these stories, people wouldn't be sad anymore. I wish it was that simple. Now he has the best job in the world. He tells stories about stories, helping people make changes in their lives that help them do the things they want to do that make them in a better place. Now, he is an author and a business journalist and has worked and appeared on CBS and Recruiters and BBC World. He has hosted events in Europe and USA, Australia, coached the Olympians, cabinet minister and CEOs. But he was born with a debilitating heart condition, and Ian spent much of his childhood in hospital. And on leaving, he declared that he would refuse to live a boring life. And this is a promise that he has kept. Storytelling, it really is something that has been done since the beginning of time. Around the campfire, do you know what I saw today? It was this big. So we've been telling stories since the beginning of time. That's how we documented our life. But then storytelling evolved into something whimsical as well, of things that we wanted to have happen in our lives. And now storytelling is on so many beautiful dimensions that it doesn't matter how you want to feel. There's a story out there that can help you feel it. Welcome to the show, Ian.
Oh, Sarah, thank you so much for having me. I have to pull you up on one thing though, which is where you said, if only it were that simple. And
Yeah,
simple is one of the words, simple is one of the words I try not to use, along with easy,
right.
because
Yeah.
it's straightforward, but it's not easy.
No.
And every therapist in the world is saying, well, thank goodness, otherwise I wouldn't have a new kitchen. Uh,
Exactly, exactly. We could simplify it though. You know, it's
yes.
not necessarily simply, but we could simplify it. I think that a lot of the time we're so busy on the story that society is telling us.
Mm.
You have to, you should do, you're only important if you do. And we're so caught up in that story that we are kind of overshadowing our own story and why we're here and what story we're here to tell.
Oh, well, should is one of the other words I try and ban from my
Yes.
vocabulary as well. So, oh, should is a terrible one because we all think we should be doing this, we should be doing that, and then we not only do we fail to make ourselves happy, but then even if we do the things we should be doing, we think, oh, we get this terrible sense of imposter syndrome. Why not happy? Why aren't other people happy? You know, it doesn't delight people. It merely makes them tolerate you.
Yes,
Anyway,
yes.
but I don't have a boring life, which is why I'm talking to you. That's this is interesting.
And it's not that you're sitting around telling stories all the time and not living life. You're
Hmm.
living the stories and then you're sharing the stories and inviting other people to share the stories because a story that is inspirational begets invitation and it
Hmm.
invites other people to say there must be a story inside of me or I'm so impacted by that story that now I want to go and do.
Yes, I think you've got to be open. Look, I've had this moment in my life where everything had sort of gone quite wrong. Financially, not in a good place. Domestically, it, was going to say in a terrible place, but that seems like a slur on East London where I was living at the time. No, all right.
It was terrible
it,
for you at the time, right?
oh, it was pretty grim. But then one day the phone rang and somebody said, "Would you like to produce some films?" And because I was in such a
Think about
poor
that.
financial place, I thought, well, that sounds like it's the kind of thing somebody would pay me for. And within 6 months of the bottom falling out of my life, I was in a helicopter calling the shots on a film that we were making over Lake Managua in Nicaragua in Central America. And it was one of those pinch me moments where
Yes.
I was going, oh, Ross, could you make sure we get a shot of the magma flowing down that mountainside? So, oh, for goodness sake, you don't even sound excited as you say.
But that is kind of like, you get the universe kind of nudge, nudge, wink, wink, tap you on the shoulders. And when we just keep taking the wrong turning until like you're bottomed out. I call that the cosmic two
Mm,
by four. And very often from that bottoming out, when there's luck, there's only up. Surely there's only up to go, then you kind of, okay, I'm open to receive. And then that's when those wonderful gifts come along. There's wonderful opportunities. But we have to put ourselves in a mindset ready to receive those opportunities. Otherwise,
mm.
it would be, no, it's too good to be true and put the phone down.
Yes, I mean, we all suffer from it a little bit. I think where we get in our comfort zone and we make the same bad choice over and over again, and that's kind of fatal. I mean, look, I gave up drinking. When was it? About 7 years ago. You will have figured, by the way, that I'm not one of those tedious ex drunks that can say it to the
To the
second.
hour, because that kind of suggests there may still be some addiction need there.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. No, I've moved on from it. So I think it's 7 years. It must be 7 years, seven and a half. Anyway, whatever it is,
A
but
good deal amount of time.
a good amount of time, and it was one. That was the big moment where I was saying to myself, well, if this isn't rock bottom, I don't want to find out what is.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and saying, well, I've made the same dumb decision every day for the last 20 years, which is if in the face of a problem, have a drink. Why
Mm,
don't I try not doing that for a change?
mhm.
And that's a really kind of people say, oh, it's a really big thing to give up drinking. It's like, yeah, but actually it's a really tiny thing as well. It's quite a small decision you make, but it has massive ramifications. And rather like carving out the Grand Canyon, if you keep doing a small thing, really a small good thing consistently, then you eventually end up with this, completely different world all around you. And you go, blimey, I did that. How the hell did I
Exactly.
do that?
And we don't know what we can do until we're willing to try. And if
Mm,
you're always putting something in the way of trying, the excuse, alcohol
mm,
is the excuse, any other form of addiction is the excuse. Low self-esteem or low self-value is an excuse. We'll find excuses everywhere. And then rather than
mm.
go, what if I could do it?
Yeah. That rather neatly brings us back to this whole idea of storytelling and
Hmm.
that story that you tell yourself, which is I'm not worth it. Or
Hmm.
the one that used to get me, Sarah, was when I was at school and there was a girl and she always had lots of boyfriends. And but I remember the teacher saying wagging the finger and saying, if you carry on like this, by the time you're 19, you're going to have three screaming children from three fathers. None of them are going to be around, and that's where you'll end up. And of course, at our age, Sarah, we go, a 19-year-old hasn't ended up anywhere. A 19 year
Right.
old is just starting off. And now, of course, she did end up uh, with I think two screaming children in a flat when she was 19. But they're grown up kids now, and I see her on Facebook. She looks like she's having a wonderful time. She's my age and she's a grandmother, and she's living her best life. You think, well, they don't stay babies forever. And
No, no, they
you
don't.
know,
And who says that your life is over at that time? Don't know if you hear that, folks, but we've got a do 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 coming in. We're not quite sure where it is coming in from, and hopefully we've dealt with it now. I started podcasting at the age of 57. I've been doing it 11 and a half years now, 10 years with my own network. And I didn't even know what a podcast was when I was asked to join. that
Mm,
that thing. I didn't know if I could do it. Didn't know nothing. In fact, actually, the first show was a Monty Python skit because I pressed all the wrong buttons, and it was live. This network was live, and that 13 months of training taught me so much about myself and what I could do, and that really had had all my life people telling me I couldn't do. So,
mm,
I think sometimes some people start early in life with their kids and family and this and that. And then by the time they reach 40, being there, done that, now it's time for me. And they still got the exuberance, but they've also got experience under their belt of a different kind that they can take forth in their lives. And then there are other people that start later in life because they want to get some life experience before they start that family. Neither road is wrong. The whole
mm,
point is that don't get complacent at any age and think this is all there is, because
mm.
our story keeps on telling until the last page in the book.
Well, so you've done the thing that I wish more people could do, which is at the age of 57, you went out and went, how can I make some more mistakes?
Yes, and believe me, I've made them. I
Yeah,
still do on a daily basis.
but I think, but you see that suggests to me a certain inquisitiveness about what the possibilities are out there. It's it's a terrible thing, but I think lots of people reach an age where they go, right, I'm really comfortable. I don't want to make
Mm.
mistakes. I don't want to learn anything else. I
I don't
don't want
want
to
to
open
rock
my
the
eyes.
boat,
I don't want to
right?
rock the boat. And then they go, I don't find modern music lyrical or tuneful, and I don't
Mm.
like modern comedy, and I don't like stuff on telly anymore. And you go,
And we sound like our grandmothers.
you
Our
go,
grandmothers.
who is this? Who's this old lady that I've suddenly turned into? But I tell you what, the game changer for me was going out with my dad and my brother, and they were having a conversation about salt. Now, I don't know if I think it might be a man thing. I don't know if women talk about salt as much as men do when they hit a certain age.
I
Have you
think
had the
it's
salt?
become, well, I live with a 90-year-old who is sugar, salt, and vinegar fest. I mean, the amount that she goes through.
Right.
She has sugar on top of sugar, and it's like she's 19, she could outrun me, so and salt and everything else. And it's everything that we're told not to do, she does in excess. So we
Right.
do have that conversation for different reasons because we don't think she's real.
uh, but yeah, my grandmother, Granny Peg, formerly mentioned at the top of this, she was always, I don't have artificial anything, no diet, nothing, no
Exactly.
aspartame, no nothing. It's just got to be horrific. Look at it. It's just lard and sugar.
Yes, yes, but they
And
were
she did all
brought up
right.
on
She
it. It's the additives that go into everything. They had it back in those days. Back in the day, they
yeah,
had purity, right? They
they
didn't
did.
have all these preservative things, like the butter would last so long in the larder. The milk would go off by this date, and they bought what they needed for the week or for 2 or 3 days before they replenished it. And they weren't all these preservatives and everything in there. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of the difference. And when we look at it, I think those preservatives that we have an additional of everything today might be kind of preserving our negativity.
Quite possibly. But scientists, I did a keynote with some scientists a while back, and I said the problem that science always has is that it deals with data. It says
Mm,
it says this is correct, or there's a consensus around that, and unfortunately, it doesn't tell stories.
no.
It deliberately doesn't tell stories, and people are. It's really hard to convince somebody with the data point because stories the programming of our that our brains run on basically, and if you'll know this, that if somebody's absolutely set in their ways and says that all preservatives are evil,
Yeah.
all preservatives are bad for you, and you go, well, no, actually, there's this one preservative here that's really good, and they go, no, 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 your data point will not change my mind. And it we're very divided in politics at the moment. We're very divided on look at vaccines,
Yes.
which you've had anti-vaccination movements in Canada as they've had in the United States, as we had in the UK,
Absolutely everywhere. Yeah.
and it's because people have a story in their heads about quote unquote chemicals,
Yeah.
which is it's got chemicals in it. Well, I'm sorry, but everything's chemicals.
And this is why
H2O.
they're busy smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That I have a heart disease and high blood pressure. I've been told to quit smoking. Hand me a fag. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and that I have another show genre called "Your Health Is Your Choice,"
Mm,
which it is that we might be dealt a hand, as you were with, heart disease. You're dealt with that hand, but how you handle it and what you
mm,
do with it, a great deal is the story you're going to tell yourself. Am I going to go around, with the heart defect crippling me, stopping me, and becomes my excuse? Or am I going to live with it and do what the best I can and do what I need to do to sustain it to the best of my
mm.
ability so I can live and really
It's,
live?
it's it's interesting, Sarah, because when I first went to hospital with my heart condition, see, I was born with it, and
Mm,
it was just after Christmas when I first went in, and everybody else there was a sort of 50, 60-year-old smoker,
mhm.
a bacon eating smoker. So I rock up as a 7-year-old. He look at me and go, "How much have you smoked in your life to be, to be here?" Because yeah, I was like, no, I'm born with it. And the reason why heart disease used to be an old person thing is because the generation of children that were born with it, something like 90% mortality.
Yes.
The nine chances in 10 you were going to die before you reached adulthood.
Mm,
And I was very lucky in that my consultant, a lady called Jane Somerville, she lift the curtain on cardiology.
mhm,
Cardiology is this incredibly macho male
mhm.
pursuit, because the heart is a pump and we're just plumbers. We're just going to plumb a new heart. And she came along as a woman in medicine in the coming up in the 1960s, and she realised that all these men didn't want to talk to bereaved parents of children, so they
Right.
stayed well away from it. And she said, "Well, hold on, if 9 out of 10 of patients die, that's a huge opportunity. You don't have to move the needle too much to make a
Right.
massive difference to loads of people." And now, of course, that's completely flipped around. If you are born with what I have, your chance of survival is something like 1 in 10. It's almost become a routine operation.
Mm,
So I was in hospital for 2 months getting well enough to have the surgery. My nephew has a similar condition to me. He was in hospital for 2 weeks. And
yeah.
I'm fairly sure that my nephew's children, if he decides to have them, if they have the same thing, they might well be in hospital for a couple of days,
Yes.
outpatients.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that is the beauty of technology, and that,
Hmm.
that is your kind of scientific story. Scientists aren't very good at kind of articulating the story, but the story is actually in what they develop,
Hmm.
in the science, in the programs and everything else. I lived in South Africa for a number of years and um, hung around with Dr. Chris Barnard, the heart
Right.
transplantist, this one, his daughter, Deirdre. And we hang about. She tried to teach me water skiing and told me, darling, you've got duck feet, get back in the boat. So, uh,
For a horrible moment, I thought you were going to say she tried to teach me heart surgery, and I
no,
just
no,
went,
no. I was in the elevator with him once, and I was 14, and I said to him, "Are you going to steal my heart?"
oh.
um,
But Jane was the physician on the first heart transplant in the UK.
right. So
So she
she,
was the physician, and the
mhm.
surgeon was a guy called Donald Ross. And the reason why I'm still alive now is because they did these transplants, but as you will know, they didn't have the drugs to keep people alive because they
That
would
was the
reject
it
the new
was the
hearts.
afterwards. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and it took about 10 years for them to get those drugs up and running and reasonably effective. So in the meantime, that's when they started saying, well, why don't we try and repair hearts? Why don't we,
Mm,
especially small hearts and children's hearts, why don't we start doing pediatric cardiology, which kind of didn't exist?
hmm.
And Jane said to Donald, "You're good with your hands. Why don't you and me set up a clinic for this?" And here I am.
Exactly.
I'm the fruits of that. Donald Ross sadly passed away a few years ago, but Jane Somerville is still alive. She's in her 90s, and I believe she lives in Malta. which
Good for
is
her.
good for her.
I mean, there's that inspiration that begets invitation. Maybe it inspires someone along the line to go into cardiology or, just
Mm,
understand the heart or want to interview people on the heart. I mean, we never know where that inspiration is going to take people. And that is, the whole thing about an inspirational story is that it's not a dictation. It's an
mm,
invitation for someone else to pick up that story and use it in whatever way that applies to them. And I think that
yeah.
is, the beauty of a good story, and this, which I always hope with my podcast, is inspires people to listen, learn, and apply in some way, whether it's one thing that we say or the whole thing of whatever, that it's a pivot into a positive direction or into an illumination of some kind. And we just never
Mm,
know where or when it's going to happen, or because I think that the listener or the reader has to be receptive in the right place at the right time for that inspiration to hit them, for them to pick it up, carry with it, and go, that's what I needed to hear. And off they
mm,
go. So this is why I think, people go back to reading a book many times and get it something different from it every time, or why we watch the same movie over and over again, certainly why we listen to the same music over and over. It is the way it makes us feel. But every time we listen, watch, or read, we're going to get a different feeling back from it, even though we know the story, because it's always a reveal of something going on within us.
mm. That's what draws us to particular pieces of art. It talks to us because
Yeah.
it ticks a box. It presses a button somewhere inside us.
Mm.
That's what we need. I was thinking as just now of I said I wasn't going to have a boring life, because what could be worse than having survived this traumatic experience in
Yeah.
childhood and then go off and being very, very dull.
Mm.
But then I suppose the answer to that is nobody should be dull. Everybody should go out and try and live their best possible life.
Yes.
And there's the back page of a book by Roald Dahl, Danny Champion of the World,
Mm.
and it's it's the final page. I would argue perhaps one of the best books in the English language, mostly because it's short, but it is,
Short, sweet,
but
and
it's also,
poignant.
but it's dead on the money, and also it
Right.
has typical Roald Dahl, absolutely pitch black morality. But
Mhm.
the back page says every child deserves a parent who is sparky, and
Yeah.
I quite like that. I don't have
Mm.
children myself, but I do think my parents are quite sparky, fun people. They're fun to be around.
Well,
My
that's,
grandparents definitely are.
with my children when they would fight when they were young, I'd
Hmm.
make them hug each other and give each other a kiss, and they were girl and boy, and it would be ew, and they stop what they're fighting about. Or I would spring into opera, and they would do anything to stop me. So, and We Are the Champions was a big family one thing to be doing, and and not to say I didn't have those moments I wanted to throttle them. They're all in their 30s and 40s now, but it's it's interesting because I was a very sickly child as well. I had
Hmm.
chronic asthma, which, bronchitis. And every time I got a sneeze or a cough, my mum put me into bed. The Elizabeth Taylor did a movie on this when she was young, always in
Right.
bed instead of living life, right? And so missed a lot of schooling, missed a lot of life. And consequently, when I went out there, I was incredibly timid and shy. And then
Hmm.
my mum just packed us up when I was 14 and we moved to South Africa. And the old terminology chalked, to cheese. That was
Hmm.
my life completely. And it suddenly get thrown into a different world, a totally different world that invited me to come and join its party because
So
South
did
Africa is such an exuberant place, was at that time anyway.
Yeah. Did that feel like a new start, or did that feel like more problems?
No, it certainly had its problems, but it was like I think when you're learning to swim,
Hmm.
somebody threw you in the deep water, swim or drown, and just so I learned to swim, even if it was just doggy paddle. And my dad had died when I was 11. So my
Hmm.
mum was a widow. She had gone taken a few cruises, and one was to South Africa, and came back and said, "That's it. We're moving there." And in some aspects, it was absolutely extraordinary because I really did find this. I'm still trying to find the word to describe, the inner me, the inner Sarah, but I was an exuberant person who just
Hmm.
wanted to enjoy life. Um, I introduced my brother to a guy who came over from England who had the turntables, and they started a mobile discotheque. And then my boyfriend and I had a mobile discotheque. I was the first go-go dancer in South Africa before it was ever, got sleazy or anything else. And at 15, I'm being paid to dance, at parties that I never would be invited to. And so it talk about let your hair down. I'd gone from timid and shy and reclusive to this out there, rather kind of on
So
steroid type person.
but moving suddenly it's a reinvention, isn't it? And how old
Yes.
were you? 14.
Yes.
That's prime.
Yes.
If I can go back to the movie Grease, you're
Hmm.
Olivia Newton-John. You've started off as
Yes.
a, a pink lady, and now you are
Right. Most certainly. Most
a
certainly.
go-go dancer.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you had, and I certainly have had this, that if you've spent a lot of time of your childhood in bed or in hospital, first of all, I'm totally incapable of figuring out what is left and right. Or, I do not move comfortably through three-dimensional space
Mm.
because whenever other boys my age were playing football, I was sitting down with a book.
Right.
So
Yes.
I read about football, didn't actually do it. Is that something you've had as well, where
Well,
you're
yes, I mean, still an asthmatic. I'm turning 69. I'm still an asthmatic. And I've
Mhm.
also, on top of it now, I've got fibromyalgia and all points that go along with that. So,
ah
one of the things I don't know about you, but I learned to partner with my diseases. They're
mhm.
there. They're not going anywhere. All right. They're not diseases that can be cured. They're ones that you have to learn to manage. So we agreed in a partnership. You allow me to go and live life and do what I love passionately. And I promise not to overexert myself. And if I do, you have the right to flatten me or, which they do now and again. I'll, wake up and it's, or be in the middle of something and flatten. And it's like,
Mm.
okay, um, you have to learn to listen to what your body or your mind, your psyche, whatever it is that's needed, to learn to listen to it and honor it, because what it wants to do is take care of you so you can replenish yourself to go back and do what you love doing. So it's partnership as I look at it. And it's like a bad marriage sometimes. It's not the partner you want, but you're lumped together and that's it. And so you just learn to deal with it. But like you, I couldn't do much in the way of sports or anything, because of the
Mm.
asthma. Swimming was great for me for some reason. So my room, I remember, was big room, white walls. I can't remember pictures being on there. And I would get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If I had an asthma attack, somebody was there. Most of the time, I was on my own. So, what are you going to do? I wasn't at a reading age. I was 2 when I started this. I went off into multiple dimensions and just created other worlds that I lived in. And,
Yeah.
that was the way I survived. There is always a story going on in my head, always.
That's funny because you sound like quite a visual person. You're talking about the big blank walls, whereas
Yes.
I'm quite auditory.
Mm.
I would sit there with a little tape recorder,
Ah,
which for anybody under 35, we used to carry our media around on cassettes, which are about the size of
yes.
which are these things about the size of a mobile phone, a cell phone, and they
I go back
used to
further than that. The cassette thing, a big square thing, yes.
we used to have these wax cylinders that we would uh, so my memory of stories is literally that oral tradition, books on
Mm.
tape,
Yeah,
and there's huge libraries of them out there,
yes.
which is you used to get really good people doing it, like John Pertwee or
Mm.
Kenneth Williams. I think had a cottage industry of recording books on tape,
Well, some
and
people are born for that, aren't they? I mean,
yes,
they sound so good. It's that they may not be that great in the theater, because my mother was a stage actress, and so you're
mm.
projecting. And when she went to radio and she was in the booth and she had to bring it down more, softer, but she hated not having an audience. So I'll be in the booth with her and would mime the reactions.
But
And
I
when
See, but I love that. I don't think I'm a very good actor on stage, but I love having the microphone and the intimacy of it because you don't have to
yes,
look at anybody else. You can
yes,
just get close to the mic and speak very softly.
yes.
I I really enjoy that. I once did a job with Simon Callow, the actor,
Hmm.
and it was an LGBT night, at a big law firm in the city, and Simon was giving a speech about being gay, and we got into this big room, and I said to him, "Will you be needing a microphone, Simon?" And he looked at me, and he went, "Dear boy, a microphone is no match for a trained diaphragm." I thought, yes, sure thing.
Love it.
And
Yeah,
it's true. There's loads of
yeah,
people, and crystal clear from the back of the room. I thought, yeah, he's
yeah.
trained, of course.
But yes, because they know that they're not speaking from the vocal cords, they're speaking from the diaphragm, and it can project out and
Mm,
command, which is beautiful. I did 5 years, so 5.5 years of only audio on my podcast, and I liked
mm,
that because I didn't see who was on the other side. So it's all that vibration of connection, because I think everything is frequency and energy, and it's
mm.
the person you connect with, and you're sharing frequencies in what you're doing. And then I was talked into doing video. And at the time, the first thing that came to my mind is, who wants to see this old bag on video? And then it followed that was like my own back of the head slap saying, it's not about you, it's about the content.
Yes, it's the stories you're telling yourself. By
Yeah.
the way, every time you mention your age, I am surprised because you're looking flawless.
Oh,
If
okay.
anybody's just listening to
Must be
this,
the lighting.
well, whoever if it is the lighting that is doing it, then they are worth the money. But you look fab.
Don't
I'm
just go
just.
one little ring here.
I mean, I'm sitting here in perfect light, which is almost complete pitch black, which is ideal for me. You've made me open a curtain.
Yes, and I do understand that intimacy. I mean, when I first got a radio, I had a transistor radio,
Yeah.
and I was in boarding school, and we weren't meant to listen to it, so it was underneath the pillow, or muffled through the pillow to hear.
Mm.
And of course, we listened to all the pops and this and that, but then you listen to the storytelling. And or the Tony Hancocks, or the various other people of that time period, right? And there's some people
Don't
that
get me started on
yeah.
Tony Hancock. We'll because I used to do I used to do lots of stand up. I used to do lots of cabaret, and one of the things I used to love doing was because it combined my two things which I enjoy, which is telling jokes and being quite useful and being entertaining. And I used to go around doing pub quizzes or trivia nights, and I would get booked for um, these golf clubs. And of course, everybody in a golf club is in their 50s and 60s. And so I would drop a little reference to Round the Horn in, and they would look
Uh-huh.
at me and go, "How on earth do you know anything about Round the Horn?"
Ah,
And I would say, I've written for the BBC. I've done a lot of comedy. I do take my job quite seriously. I
yes.
don't think I don't, my sphere of influence is not just the stuff I happen to like. I do quite enjoy going to the weeds a bit. I bought my last Tony Hancock album less than a month ago,
Right. I mean,
so
that's the thing, is
just
that
keeping
those
up to
kind of,
date.
yeah, I mean, I'm way behind, but the whole thing about, people of back then, they came from the stage, and then they went into radio, and then they
Hmm.
may have gone into TV or film, but most of those people were kind of stage people, and they knew how to really command the audience. They knew the art of the pause. Right.
Hmm.
And how that laughter could fill the pause, or sometimes just the silence filling the pause, which could have such a big impact as well. And they were artists. They were beautiful artists. And I talk about Monty Python skit, where a lot of people have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, especially here in North America. And those that do get it, are people that have lived in Britain or are British or whatever. But they're people that kind of paved the way for others. And I
Hmm.
always think it's a disservice for us not to know who these people are, because, you wouldn't be where you are today without the people that have paved for you before. So,
You go to the source, but it's
yes,
interesting.
yes,
I find Python really fun, but they were inspired, and I like Peter Cook as well.
yeah,
But though they both go, oh yeah, I was inspired by the Goon Show, and I go to the
yes.
Goon Show, and I admire it more than I like it. It's like the thread is broken, and
Yeah,
I've listened to a good few, and I can go right. I've got the measure of it. I get what's
yeah,
going on,
yeah.
but it's not what I listen to for fun. I occasionally people who don't know any better say to me, Ian, how do you write better? How do you write comedy?
Mm.
And I always go back to Hancock and I say, listen to Tony Hancock from series one all the way through of series one on the radio all the way through to the eighth series of TV, and you will hear how those two writers, Gordon and Simpson, how they evolved through the years.
Mm,
You also hear how Hancock evolved as a performer, because, like you say, he started off very, very stagey,
mm.
and it doesn't work when you're doing a
No.
naturalistic sitcom, which Hancock's half
Yeah.
hour was. And his voice just goes from being really very mannered to this much more sort of, oh dear, blimey, and stuff said under his breath and said too quickly
Yes.
so you can't hear what he's saying.
Yeah. Yes. My brother is an author. He's in the UK, and he's been writing for donkey's years. Again, another English terminology, folks.
Yeah.
Donkeys last a long time.
It's
That's the
me,
reason
isn't it?
why.
I've got this influence on you. By the end of this, we'll be eating fish and chips and going,
I'll
go
just get the
save the
mushy
king.
peas. But he's had his influences, etc. But I do remember the Gong Show. I don't know if he came Gong Show, Monty Python, and then Doctor Who on a Saturday night. And we could not go out on a Saturday night, or my dad would not go out date night with my mum until those three shows were done. And this is the early Doctor Who when it first came out, right?
Right.
So Gong Show, Monty Python, and that show. Dad, we're hungry. We're going for dinner. We're hungry. Nope, nope, not until the shows are over.
Not till the Daleks are vanquished.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And God, look at that impact of the Daleks. I'm sure when they first wrote them in, they never expected them to last more than kind of that seasonal story. And look at it, all these years, 50, 60 years later, the Daleks are still very much alive.
Well, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a Whovian, but I believe Doctor Who was originally started off as an educational
Yes, as a kids show.
program,
Yes.
and so they half the stories were going to be genuine history, so you'd learn about Tudor England or
Right.
prehistory or whatever, and then the other half would be set in space or set in the
Yeah.
future. So it would be science bits, so it'd be proper history,
Yeah.
proper sci-fi, and that's why the original William Hartnell is an old man, because he's a figure of authority. And now, of course, we see the Doctor as being this incredibly sort of mercurial character, and is certainly not an authority on anything very much. He just
Well, no,
sort of,
David Tennant played a brilliant Doctor Who, and he's a great actor. And then you had Matt Smith, who then took over for him, who also brought a quirkiness to him. It took me a couple of episodes to kind of get into him because he was so different from David. But then you really kind of grew to love him because there was a quirkiness and almost a sense of clumsiness around him, which normally we don't associate with the Doctor being all wise, right? But I mean, I love sci-fi, so I'm a sci-fi geek completely, and I love outer world anything, supernatural, metaphysical, all of that. I love it. But and the interesting thing is, I was going through my divorce, and at that time, the books that I was reading were metaphysical. And it's like I almost had to remove myself from this world to make sense of my life through these metaphysical books.
Sarah, I've always managed to find hidden depths in the flimsiest of
Yes,
comedies.
absolutely,
Do you know
absolutely.
the film Galaxy Quest?
Mm-hmm.
There's a
Yes,
marvelous bit. Alan Rickman, if
yeah.
to your dear listener who doesn't necessarily know, the idea is basically this: the cast of Star Trek are
Mm-hmm.
bored doing conventions where they sign photographs of themselves to Star Trek fans, until one day real aliens turn up and they've got a real problem, and they take them onto a real spaceship, and they find that it's all real.
Yes,
And
yes.
Alan Rickman, who is Dr. Lazarus, the Mr. Spock of the
Mm.
outfit, says to the captain, and the captain's very gung ho about this, and yes, we will destroy these evil aliens. Dr. Lazarus just goes, "May I remind you that it's a costume, not a uniform." And that line has stuck with me. Whenever I have imposter syndrome, I'm always going to myself, "You're in a costume, not a uniform."
But that's the beauty of that kind of writing, isn't it? It may be just fun and frivolous, but I love it when you see the hidden message, when something more
Yeah.
of depth is lying inside of it. I have another genre called the author's kiss. And the
Mm.
reason I call it, there's two reasons I call it. That one is I found a great graphic of a book when open looked like lips, so an author's kiss. But I also think that when you read a book and you put it down and you feel that it's embraced you, and you want to recommend it, or you refer to that story, or you could pick it up at any chapter and
Mm,
read it again, and now it's got something else to tell you. And I think that's the beautiful thing about storytelling. You can hear the same story over and over again, but each time it's a different tone or a different setting or a different something, and it has a different message for you.
mm. Yeah, I love that when stories you go back to them like time and time again and they change their meaning for you. I remember reading Sue Townsend's brilliant on this because she has a character, Adrian Mole, who grows up, and when you read him when you're a teenager, you
Mm.
see the world absolutely through his eyes. And then when you grow up a bit and you read it again, you it's a completely different story. It's the parent story. It's about their marriage falling
Yes.
apart.
Yes.
And all of the stuff, it's all in there. All the affairs, all of the
Mm.
drinking too much and fights and fallings out. It's all there, but it passes you by because it passes Adrian by. But it's
Yes.
and you come back to it as an adult. Sue Townsend, who I met once very briefly, but she was everything I wanted her to be. She was so lovely.
Now,
And
isn't that lovely when you actually meet somebody and they're actually what you know, you wanted you hooked into their vibe, and then
yeah,
when you meet them, they are actually that vibe. There's nothing worse than meeting somebody and going, "What? What? You are a good actor," because there's no reflection of a human being there.
no, but that's the thing about fame though, isn't it? Well, I've got a couple of friends who have, let's not call it fame, let's call it profile. And they say it's awful because if I have a bad day, and one of them, okay, he'd gone through a bereavement and he's known for being funny. And he said it was awful because you couldn't go to the supermarket and do your weekly shop without somebody coming up to you wanting you to be funny
Mm.
and you wanting them not to have a bad experience because you know that if they do, they go, oh, you see such and such, then not as much fun when they're off as when they're on.
Right.
And he was struggling to find a way of take care of himself and go through the grieving process because there were other people there that were in the
But
way.
isn't that, I mean, you look at Robin Williams and,
Mm,
and a few other, I mean, Robin Williams, sheer brilliance, whether he was playing a straight role or a comedy or, an endearing story. I mean, this man was a true artist that everybody fell in love with, but he had his demons. And I think a lot to do with comedy, is that people expect you to be on all the time. And of course, he was
mm,
impossible to interview because you pushed a button and off he went. There was no reining him in, right?
mm.
He was just being Robin and off he was going. But you would split your sides with laughter because this guy could really deliver. But nobody can sustain that all the time. And we need, the most, I think, you can speak to this. I think most comedians are introverted extroverts, and they need the introvertedness to regroup and re-energize and just calm down to refocus, and so the extrovertedness can come out.
So very often, because I coach people in professional speaking skills, and very often people say, I'm not a good speaker because I'm an introvert.
Right.
To which my answer is, if you're an introvert, you are a huge advantage as
Mm.
a public/professional speaker. And the reason for that is that you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about the audience. You're going to
Yes.
give the audience what they want. If you are an extrovert, you walk onto the stage, you go out and you've got nothing. You've got no gags, no
Yeah.
content, no message for that audience to take away.
Mhm.
And the audience is just going to go, so what? Except you don't know that because you're an extrovert, so you don't care what they think.
No, no, I call them
Whereas,
grandstanders, because
yeah,
I've had them on the air where they actually don't actually understand that podcasting is conversational, not it's not just another stage platform for you.
mm,
And they don't know how to converse. They don't know how to interact because all they know is that being on that stage, camera, lights, action, and
mm,
da-da, and there they go. And then off that stage, they're no longer that shtick. And
yeah.
who are they now? And you're trying to converse with them of who they are now. And unless they are, being the grandstander, they don't have any other identity.
And it's very difficult because obviously comedians, like anybody else, they have good days, they have bad days, but
Yes.
then they brush themselves down and go to work, and the work happens to be standing on a stage making people laugh.
Yeah.
And I've done that when I'm in a terrible mood, and I've had good gigs when I've been in a bad mood. But what happens is you sit there off stage and you chat, and sometimes the chat is serious, and sometimes the chat is funny. But you can always tell when someone's doing a bit, and they'll go, and then my mum says this, and then my dad says that, and you go, "Are you doing a bit now?
Yeah.
That's that's really poor form." And sometimes they're, "Yeah, I am. I own it.
Yes.
I'm trying out. I'm trying out a new thing." And you're like,
Yeah,
"Fine, if you want to
you
try out a
don't
new
like it,
thing."
fine, then it doesn't work. Did you ever see the series The Marvelous Miss Maple?
No, I didn't. Tell me
Highly
all.
recommended, highly recommended. She's a young Jewish girl, opens up with her actually, kind of delivering um, a piece of shtick at her wedding, though she's not a comedian this time, she just is a deliverer. Uh, Marriage goes wrong, and she's got neurotic Jewish parents. He's a professor, but he thinks everybody's stupid. And your mum is a matchmaker, but always trying to prove herself. And anyway, it ends up with her accidentally falling into, becoming a comedian. And I think you can see a little bit of a Joan Rivers in there.
Mhm.
But the woman who did this, I mean, the writing is sensational, but her delivery is just like she is on from one thing to the other, and she delivers. She doesn't drop it at any time. And it is like to know that dialogue. I mean, there has to be the comedic side of her anyway, but it's really well written. And,
Mm.
it took me a while to actually decide to watch it. And when I did, I couldn't kind of put it down, so to speak, kind of binged. But very well written, and it kind of her life as a comedian until later, and all the ups and downs of faux pas and lovers and this and that, etc. But how everything makes the stage.
Yeah. It's all grist to the mill, isn't it? And
Yes.
that's what everyone says. Oh, I've had my car stolen, my house was broken into, disaster has befallen me, and people go, "God, that's terrible." But you've got your Edinburgh show next year. You know?
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's also very British sense of humor. I like British sense of humor because it's generally double entendre and, a kind of a little off, if you know what I mean.
So
It's
if you want a double entendre, I'll give you one.
okay, give me one.
I just did.
But British humor is, as I said, there's always two sides to it. It's always a little naughty and a little, something else, which I love about it.
Hmm.
Whereas here in North America, it's very more slapstick and very, it kind of sometimes could be quite evasive, intruding. And
Hmm.
depending on which kind of comedian you're looking at, get their laughs very much at the expense of other people, which I'm not saying that, Brits don't, but it's just done in a more of a subtle way, I think, the double meaning.
It's interesting. I did 2 weeks of stand up and improv in New York City, which I found really, it was a good thing to have done for me, if not the audience.
Mhm.
No, the
And
audience
how
was
did you find
fine.
it though? Because you're making English references, which you've got to change because they don't
Yeah,
kind of get it. Your delivery may be different. How did you
I,
feel?
yeah, I'd walk on and think to myself, God, none of these people have been to Tesco. None of these people know who Sandy Toksvig is. None of these people have had spaghetti hoops on toast. Let's see. That's my act. I've
Right.
got
So,
I've got nothing.
how can I put in the reference? Walmart.
Yeah,
Um,
I would, but I would go out and you had to get comfortable with people not laughing for the first 5 minutes or so
yes.
because they're getting used to your voice, and especially I tend to talk a bit quick. He said,
Mhm.
suddenly slowing down, and I tend to be,
To make a
I tend to,
point.
I tend to be a little bit Essex on stage. I've
Uh-huh.
poshed up a little bit for this because it's a proper interview, Sarah. But I do get a little bit East London, a little bit Essex, and 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 I found that the only way to get over it was to one be incredibly comfortable with the silence and the
Yes.
jokes not working, and two was to chat to the audience and talk to them, and so we got to know each other and make it much more conversational.
Invitational again, right?
Yeah,
Back to
I,
that
I remember
invitation.
I remember a couple sitting on the front row, and the whole thing only really clicked when I said, "Are you two together?" And they said, yes. And I said, she looks fantastic. Why haven't you dressed up to come out tonight?
Hmm. Hmm.
And the whole thing was about how gorgeous she was and about what we could do to make him, groom and dress better. And it was incredibly complimentary to her. It was a bit cheeky to him, but he
But
wasn't
probably
gonna.
exactly what she wanted. You probably read her mind saying, yes, pick on him. I can never get
Yes,
him to dress up.
she looked. I just remember the line that got it because she was wearing this amazing black and white dress that just she actually had a great figure and it clung to every curve. And I just went, I mean, you look like you're going to a ball game, and your girlfriend is dressed like a piano. Which was and it everything just clicked and they were just on
Yes.
my side.
But
And it
going
was
back to that silence bit too, again, people think that a comedian has to be no drawing of breath, one to the next to the other. But a
yeah,
good comedian, rather like the Tony Hancocks, etc. of the world, they know how to use that pause, that silence there for a moment, because sometimes it could just, the entire next bit could be in the body. The way you
yeah,
stand yourself, the way you look at the audience, because they don't know what's coming next. They don't know who you're going to pick on next. So, and it's just that anticipation. And I think that that's really the true art, if like being able to speak volumes in a
yeah.
silent moment.
Do you know, Sarah, I'd love the idea that somewhere out there is someone listening to this who has not heard Sunday Afternoon at Home with Tony Hancock or watched The Bedsitter, again, Tony Hancock. And Sunday Afternoon at Home is is a radio half hour built around silence,
Mm-hmm.
where they're bored on a Sunday afternoon and whole stretches go by with just and the bedsitter is where Hancock used to be surrounded by all these other characters, and he kept saying to his writers, "I want it to be just me, just me, just me." And then they went, "Right, okay, if you want it to be just you, then f you, we're just going to put you on." And so it's him by himself in a flat, not where we've seen him before, completely new setup, and it is the weirdest half hour of television I think you'll ever see in your life. But it's about a middle-aged man being bored, and
Yes.
it's brilliant. It's
Yes.
amazing. It's
Again,
such a
reflection. How many of us have been there? Don't have to be middle-aged and a man for it, right? We've
yeah.
all been there. And that, I mean, that's what we kind of find funny sometimes is the relatability. I'm
Mm,
laughing, but that's me. And,
yes.
and
And
that's where the laugh comes from, because you're now
and
laughing at yourself.
and talking about shoulds, Hancock, his career failed because he was always like, I want to be international. I want to be like Laurel and Hardy. I want to be like Chaplin. Where do they live? Nowhere. And he was wrong. They lived in America. Oliver Hardy was a Southern gent.
Yes.
You know,
Have you seen
Chaplin
the
was,
movie on him, by the way, on Laurel and Hardy? What did they call it?
yeah.
Very well done. Really well
Steve
played.
Coogan as
Yes,
Stan Laurel.
that one
Brilliant.
scene they did of
Mm,
them looking for each other, coming out, looking in the wrong way and going back in. Just that. I mean, that was the
yeah.
beauty of them. They could take that moment of silence in body action and have an
Mm,
entire skit in that. They didn't say a thing in that bit, but you had
exactly.
people laughing because it's behind you, it's there, and they just miss each other all the time.
But comedy is very often the universality of it is in the specifics.
Yes.
And it's not saying let's pull back and let's be an everyman, let's be as bland and as blank as possible. It's like, no, I'm going to be full of these neuroses and full of these characteristics, and we're going to be very specifically set in this time and this place. That's why Faulty Towers has lasted
Yeah.
so well,
Yes.
because it is a 1970s hotel in Torquay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and you totally trust that. And if it was just a hotel somewhere, you'd go, well, it doesn't look like any hotel I've ever been in,
Hmm.
but which it doesn't. It looks like a 1970s hotel in Torquay.
Yes. Yes. And
and,
it's some
and
great, and
that's
it's not all about John Cleese. I mean, I can't remember the name of the waiter, but he
Manuel.
Manuel. I mean, Manuel really didn't say too much, but again, he was another one that was a great physical comedic in what he did. Um, where John was kind of more of the over the top. But I mean, of course, so Fish Called Wanda, a great movie, and
Yeah.
all of those type of things. But um,
Have you seen the follow-up to that?
no, no, I didn't know there was
Fierce. It's
one.
called Fierce Creatures. It's my if I'm in a bad mood, I always put it on, and it was panned when it came out, but it's so gentle and sweet and
Mm,
funny, and there's just enough grit in there. And
right.
I once was in an elevator, and Ronnie Corbett, who's in this movie,
Uh-huh.
walked in to the elevator, and I said, "Hello, Mr. Corbett." And he said, "Hello." I said, "You're in one of my favorite films." And he said, "Oh goodness, dear boy, what was that?" And I went, "It's Fierce Creatures." And he said, "Did you like it?" And I went, "Yes." He said, "I think you're the only person that does." uh, I said, "No, it's great. It's gentle. It's sweet. And Ronnie Corbett's lovely in it. He's
Mm.
because he plays a penguin keeper in a zoo." And I will say no more. I just let your listener, discover it for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully it's on Netflix or so one of those type of streaming things. I'll look out for it.
They're
Um,
desperate to claw back the money. It will be everywhere.
yes, exactly, exactly. I'm going back now even further to the 60s. So, as I've already revealed my age, but you had the Carry On movies,
Mm,
and you had Hattie Jakes, another great actress, and you had what was the name of the guy? He was from Cleethorpes, and I was brought up in Grimsby, around the corner from there. Um, and he always played her love interest. And I remember one of the things she was a matron in the hospital, and it was maternity
mm.
ward, and this guy thought that he was pregnant when his wife was being pregnant.
Charles Hawtrey.
Right. And it's just like yes, they were little slapstick and a little over the top, but at the same time, you just look at that timing, that timing of the delivery, etc. And I remember growing up with those and absolutely laughing. On this side of the pond, there's the Carol Burnett show
Mm.
and the scenes that they did. In fact, they had actually a show on the other day of her 90th birthday, reflecting back on her times as an actress, but of the Carol Burnett show, and the people were on it. And I don't know if you ever saw the episode, but it's somebody is coming to pick her up and she's got nothing to wear, and it's in a Gone with the Wind scene, and of course there's curtains, velvet curtains with the rod. So she puts that on top of the head, and it's, "I love your outfit. I saw it in the window, and I just had to have it." And it's a classic that's kind of that was what, the 70s, and it's still laughed at today. But that's the thing about comedy, isn't it? It's so much of it is not just what the content is, but the timing of it, because I think it's the
Mm.
timing that does it. There's a young guy on America's Got Talent here, because I think you have British Got Talent. He's
Yeah,
on
yeah.
American. He has cerebral palsy, and so he does all of his answers through the phone. And so there's a pause while he's typing,
It's
and
not
then
Lee, is it? Lost Voice guy.
it might be. He has cerebral palsy and he has a dog. Um, and I can't remember the name. Sorry, he's new to it. So, but he's really good, and he's very good at coming back very quickly. But you know that there's a pause while he's
Mm.
typing because he can't speak, right? And then he delivers it. And I don't know how much is prearranged because a lot of it is interaction with the judges. And he's just like so spot on. He's made it to the semi-finals. I doubt that he will actually win, just because comedians generally don't, and there's a lot of great talent there. But so many comedians have gone on to that show, which has just opened them up to the world and gone on to do extremely well. But here's somebody who has cerebral palsy, and most people be in a chair and kind of not doing much in life. I've interviewed people who are artists and doing other things with it, and he decided to be a comedian. And I think back in the day he would have just been booed off, but life has
Mm.
changed now, you know.
I wonder because again, going back to what I do when I talk to people about how to deliver better presentations on stage, the first thing people always say is do you've got to make sure you've got lots of good eye contact with the audience.
Hmm.
I'm like, right. Well, one of the best speakers I've ever seen is a guy called David Blunkett, used to be our Home Secretary, blind, can't
Uh-huh.
make eye contact.
Right.
Yeah. Lee, Lost Voice guy, whose second name unforgivably escapes my
Yes,
memory at the
I have
moment.
to look that up. Yeah, it
But
might be him.
when
I don't.
but I've worked with a lot of disabled comedians, and when the audience gets it, they don't laugh at them. They give them the
No.
space to do what they need to do.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
don't know if that's a new thing,
I think it is
or
fairly new. As I say, I've been doing this 11 and a half years, and one of the
yeah.
guys I interviewed was a, um, a veteran, and his hammy got blown up, and he was the only one that survived. And his
Mm,
skull was burnt right down to anything, and he lost half of an arm. And he I've interviewed him 3 times, and he became a comedian.
mm,
Because that was the way. And another young girl who was a burn victim became a singer. Um, and it's whatever the inner passion is that becomes their sanctuary, becomes their survival. And so he's now a comedian out there. And, he would talk about, I've just had another operation, my butt skin onto my eyelid. How does it look? And he knows how to make fun of his situation.
mm,
But at the same time, having interviewed him, I know that he has those times where those are the bad days, when the rabbit holes open up. But they
mm.
learn how to use those days, even in their skits, right? So
Yeah,
it's
it's all it's all light and shade. And what
yeah,
we go to comedy for, we go to
yeah,
comedy not to not to not to plaster over the bad things that happen in life, but sometimes to exercise. That's why we
yes,
have poor taste jokes.
yeah,
It's not because we are on the side of, you know, the aggressor, or we're not on the side of the insert here hurricane or
right,
whatever. It's because we need to have those things acknowledged and processed in a safer and healthier way.
right. And I think
So
that's, you can talk about a dark subject. And, another comedian I absolutely love, a young guy, Trevor Noah. I love
he's
him. And
great.
he did a show with Jay Shelty.
Mhm.
And I would say that, Trevor came off from even the entire interview was so profound. I had to do a show on it, my own
Mm.
show platform because of what they were saying. But he was talking about going to India and around the poverty and saying how familiar it was and how at ease he was with it. And the people say, how can you be so at ease amongst the squalor and such poverty? And it's because he came from that. Right. So,
Mm.
he learned to find humor. But the beauty of him is that he's one of the most well-balanced equilibrium thought guys I've ever come across. And
Mm.
so he can deliver something, but at the same time, there's always a good chunk of food for thought.
Yeah, there's a comedian here called Joe Salowitz who's so blue and is so outrageous. Yeah, I don't think you'll be able to find anything of him online, and certainly not on telly.
Right.
But it's like a cathartic experience. When you walk
Mm.
out of there, you go, "Oh my God, what was I laughing at? I must be a terrible person." And then you go, I feel like something has been exorcised. I feel
Well,
that it's
it's
all
it's
off me
the
now.
permission. It's
Yeah.
the permission to laugh at things that you normally would never laugh at because it's just not apropos.
Yeah.
Right? And
But
so it's that guilty pleasure of I've just spent myself in a safe place.
yeah, it's like walking away from the guillotining, but
With your head still
but
on.
but your head's still on. uh, yeah, I didn't think this was going to turn into a comedy chit chat. How nice, how
Well,
nice.
I
That's,
mean,
I tell you, we've got over here. Talking about unlikely sources of comedy. I've just been to see Operation Mincemeat, which
oh,
I
yes.
thoroughly recommend.
Yes,
Have
no,
you seen the movie?
yes, I have. Yes. Very
Nothing to
good.
do with the movie.
Oh,
Nothing to do
okay.
with it. It's the same story, but it's a
Mhm,
musical. It's 5 people in it, so they all take on loads of different roles, and it's astonishingly good. And if it doesn't move on from the West End, then I'm a Dutchman. It's got to go. It's got to travel. It's extended its run 3 or 4 times in the theatre it's in at the moment. The theatre it's in is too small. It's
mhm.
it's amazing.
Is it a comedic or just parody?
It's no, it's really funny.
Mhm,
It's also incredibly moving,
mhm.
and it just you walk out of it going, that was a brilliant piece of theatre.
Right.
And I've seen it twice. First time I took my partner. The second time my partner's mother came to stay with us, and he went, oh, what should we do to entertain her for one evening? Operation Mincemeat.
Right.
And he told me, I've got us tickets for that again. And I was like, yes. Do you mind going to see it twice? I was like, no.
Yeah, but that's the
Delighted.
thing. It's because it becomes like nectar, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, like the first time was a wonderful surprise. The next time you know what's coming. So you're going to pay more attention or things are going to have a bigger impact on you. And,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's again, it's that story being told. You know, my mum is a stage actress, would say that every night, even though she was saying the same lines, would be a different performance because they would feed off the audience. And whatever the
Mm.
audience energy is, would change the frequency of their delivery. And so, I mean, when I do any talks, I'm not a reader of speech. I may have something up there that's highlighted, keep me on track,
Mm.
but I like intimate. I don't like great big huge arenas because I like question and answer period too. But and it is that whole feeling of I have everybody do something like stand up and take 3 deep breaths
Mm.
and then say hello to your person either side of you to make it a little more intimate. But it's for me just to put everybody on an even keel energetically. Let go of
Yes.
what you came in with. Let's get centered to be on the same vibe.
I think consciously or not, lots of performers do that. My one is put your hand in the air and
Mm,
keep your hand up if, because then everyone's got their hand up. Because if you say put your hand up if you think this, then
yeah,
people do it.
yeah,
Once you've got their hand up, they're committed.
yes,
And they're like,
yeah,
well, do I keep it up? Do I take it down?
yeah.
But
And I think that, you know, everybody finds that little shtick, you know,
yeah.
and I think it's setting the vibe. You know, you're setting the stage of how you want your audience to receive you. There
Mm.
are some people that are just natural. They can just get up on that stage. But even if they're very, very good, there's always strategies one needs to know how
Mm.
to adapt to an audience or adapt to the content or adapt to the country you're in. Right?
Yeah,
Because
there's
God
that.
forbid you should say something in a country that they find offensive. Next thing you know, you're behind bars. So
Ah,
there's,
I was doing a conference in Paris, and I was moderating a conference, and moderating is great fun because you stand up there and you go, the coffee's over there, the toilets are there, and lunch is at 12. But first, here's your speaker, and then you get to run around and do interviews and questions and talk to the audience. And I was on stage, and the audience starts laughing, and I was like, "What are you laughing at?" And they said, "Monsieur, your prime minister, she has just resigned." Great. and and you might not be aware that there is a little animosity between the British and the
Oh my
French.
God. A
They would del-
little, it goes back to Napoleon days. My God, you know, time to move on, folks. Yes.
they
Yeah.
were delighted to see my humiliation, and all I could do was sort of chuckle. And then I was mean to them back because I said I love France, I love the French. Every time I go out in London, I know a little French bistro. It's called Pret à Manger, and they went, and Pret a Manger is a big chain, right? So the idea is a bistro is
Right,
ridiculous.
yeah.
But one of them on the front row, someone just went, "Monsieur, that is Belgian," and I went, "French, Belgian, whatever."
And I think
That's,
that's again, that's the confidence, the
yeah,
skill, the time of doing it is if you get a heckler, if you get somebody saying something or putting you correct on something, how do you not take, you know, embarrassment or offense of it? How do you take it and make it into something?
yeah. Do you know what? I got it down to three things. So I wrote a book 10 years ago. We're doing a second edition. I've been editing it today. Second edition, 10 years anniversary, about how to stand up and speak in public. And because I'd Googled how do you be a good public speaker, and it said 100 top tips, and I thought 100. I'm lucky if I can remember my name when I walk on. So I go down to three, Sarah. I go down to three things. First of all, is you got to be in charge, authority. Authority. Okay, be in charge. You're in charge of the space. You're in charge of what happens. You're in charge of yourself. Authenticity. Be yourself.
Mhm.
Everybody else is taken. So
Absolutely.
don't bluff them. Be yourself. And finally, what does the audience want slash need? Make sure you give it to them. And I went authority, authenticity, audience. Each of those words begins with AU. AU is the chemical symbol for gold. Three golden principles. Job done. I'm going to have a cup of tea. So as a writer, that was my happiest morning, my
Yes.
most productive.
Right. And that's the thing is that, an epitome of something that
Mm,
um, I've just written my memoir, which is when I go over to England, my brother is going to final edit for me so I can get it out. But we're also doing a book series on the Forgotten Children series, which an anthology of people putting in what we're doing wrong in the raising of our
mm,
children, because we're raising dysfunctional adults and how we can change things, right? And um, our poor kids are just thrown into a world of such dysfunction right now and not showing which way to navigate the waters because the waters are constantly changing.
mm.
And how can they be themselves? And you put number two as be yourself. So many people don't know how to be themselves because they're so busy trying to please others and what they want. And I spent over 50 years doing this, folks. What a waste of time because, too afraid to be myself. And the stupid hand thing, you raise it and the screen switches. um, and that's the point. If you know a confident speaker, a confident storyteller, a confident comedian or just announcer because they have done the work to know who they are. Because if there
Mm.
isn't any authenticity in there, then all they're hearing are words with no attachment to it,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
And I think Instagram's got a lot to answer for on that front as well, because you look at the Insta life or the
Yes,
whatever social media platform you happen to be on, there's always going to be someone there that looks prettier than you and you
yes,
know whatever. And you think, God, that's their life. And of course, those of us that have seen what it takes to set up a nice looking shot, be that of a volcano in Nicaragua or a portrait. I had my portrait done by a friend of mine, very good portrait artist, photographer. And I said, "Oh, when can I see the pics?" I said as I was getting ready to go. And he said, "Oh, I'll just run them through Photoshop. It should be a couple of weeks." I was like, "What's wrong with this?
yeah.
2 weeks? You're going to work on this for 2 weeks to get it
Yeah.
acceptable?" And he said, "Oh no, I've got a backlog. That's why it's going to take you 2 weeks." I said, "Okay,
Yeah,
fine."
yeah.
But
Yeah,
if you don't know what it takes to get looking
exactly.
that pretty, you go
Yeah,
you reset. You go, that's normal. And if you
yeah,
think that's normal, then you're never going to be happy with your quotidian. Looking at myself, blotchy, double chin, slightly unshaven. God, I shouldn't let my hair be cut this short, should I? Look, but hair. If you're listening to this, it's hair by Jim Henson. It's,
oh no, I cut my own hair. Yeah, I gave up on hairdressers because I'd have to come back and recut it. So I
yeah, but
do my own hair
Sarah,
now.
we've established though that you have the skin of a baby,
Oh no, no, no.
and now you
It
have
definitely is lighting. I'll show you.
and you
See,
you've
there
magic
I
you
am.
magic just you've magic a good hairdo. See, that's still much better than this.
Nonsense. Nonsense. And you see, that is another thing that I think we need to add to the thing is this two C's I cannot stand. Compare and compete. Competition
Mm,
is for competing in a competition, right? Don't compete with anyone else. You can be driven by somebody, inspired by them to want to achieve the same level, but don't compete. Don't compare. As you said earlier, there is only one you, right? What is the
mm,
best you that you can bring out? And are you not willing to live a headline and you're willing to actually have a content within yourself and you're willing to take the journey into your own self-discovery of just how flawsome you are, because we've all got beautiful flaws that make us
mm,
quirkily who we are. And when we realize we're flawsome and we love ourselves despite that, we glue our cup back together with love, self-love, then we
mm.
become more enriched and abundant. And people know that signature differently. They know when it's just the words rah, 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 and they know it's rah, rah.
Yeah.
You don't even believe in what you're saying. As to somebody that comes across with somebody there, you can feel the passion, you can feel the attachment to it. And really, we're a world that is hungry for content that has attachment to it because we've been served on all these social medias just headlines.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. AI, we're all told is gonna take away our jobs as creatives. It's not, because you need to connect with a real person. And
Yes.
AI is probably brilliant at giving me a 5-point plan of how to make a lasagna,
Hmm.
but it's not going to move me.
Right.
It's not gonna move me like a great bit of, like the back page of Danny Champion of the World. A robot is not going to make me laugh like Jay Sadowitz makes me laugh.
Right.
As I question my own humanity. God, God, I shouldn't be recommending him because it is extraordinary. And it's not going to lift you in the way that when you come out of a performance of something live and something happens and you know that it's only going to happen on that night in that space
Right.
with those people and it will never happen again and it's not been recorded.
Right.
That
Exactly.
a
And
robot
that's
can't do that.
no, but it's a marvelous tool. I do use it now and again. And it's a marvelous tool, just like the internet's a marvelous tool, the mouse, the lighting, this and that, they're all marvelous tools. But again, if we're willing to give up our power, it will take that power. If we're willing to be empowered, then we'll know how to use the tool wisely.
Well, here, yeah. And it's like the printing press
Yeah,
didn't destroy writing.
no,
Yeah,
no. It
print on
brought it about,
demand.
yeah, yes, and yes, and it brought it about in a different way. I mean, if you remember, the Victorian times when the trains came about, they had people walking in front of it because if it went too fast, it might run somebody over.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
look at it now, you've got the speed bullet. We evolve, folks. We learn. And the thing that we have, I don't know if I can do it until I try. And you've got scientists doing that, you've got creators doing that. But if you're coming always from the moral compass of, yes, I can do it, but should I do it? This is where the should comes into it.
Yeah.
Should I do it? Because will the cost of doing it be too much on humanity?
Hmm. You've got to treat these things like they're enablers. So, for example, getting a book published used to mean that you would invest thousands and thousands of pounds. You'd have people getting their fingers inky as they put together every single page of your 300-page novel in type, and then they roll it off, hundreds of copies off the press, a huge investment of time and human effort.
Yeah.
And I've just finished a novel. It's 50,000 words, and I've just gone online. Apparently, I can get a paperback copy of it for 10 quid, just one.
Yeah.
And it will be delivered on Wednesday.
Right.
Right. So the barrier to entry of writing a novel has significantly dropped. Everyone's
Yes.
got 10 quid they can spend on it. If the barrier of entry to stand up is zero, I can walk 30 minutes in that direction and there'll be an open spot comedy club, which I can go on and do a page of jokes which I wrote this afternoon.
Yes. Test them out, see how they're received, what you need to tweak, hone your craft.
Technology has suddenly enabled us to do all these things.
Yes.
And so when AI comes along and says, I'll do that job for you, I don't buy that for a second. I don't think it will take over.
No.
Because
I
we're
mean,
we're
do
too enabled to
understand.
do things
Well,
ourselves.
exactly. I do understand what the strike is all about, in America, where they want a clause in there. I mean, there's other things they're striking about because they don't get any money from streamlining, right? Only if it's on main cable, but they should be paid every time it's aired, no matter where it is. But the other thing is they want in their contract that AI can't take their jobs, right?
Yeah.
Use as a tool, use to enhance, but not to replace. And I don't blame them because otherwise it's much cheaper for the establishment to put AI in there than a human. But then what we already have a robotic society and we desperately need to inject more humanity into it. And so replacing, just because you're making bigger bucks, soon there won't be a humanity. We'll all be robotic and you won't have any more generations. People will go, well, why do I need that?
I lost a job to AI. I used to do content creation for a company, and then ChatGPT landed, and almost overnight they just stopped phoning up and asking me for work. And I said it doesn't matter. I said because I bet it's rubbish. And I looked them up afterwards, and I saw what ChatGPT was creating. I went, it's rubbish. They'll come crawling back. And then last weekend, someone I hadn't talked to for ages, another freelance writer, got in touch and said, hey, Ian, I've just been offered this job with this company. You used to work for them. What did you charge them? And he'd been offered my whole job. And I said, don't take a penny less than
yes,
whatever it was, what I was charged.
Yeah, they kind of don't want to come back to you because the tail is between their legs, right?
Yeah.
So they're embarrassed, right? And
Oh,
that, get over
also,
it, folks.
we did have an argument about money once, and I because I said I want this much money, and and they said, "Oh, we don't know." I said, "What are you talking about? You kept me waiting for 10 minutes in your reception, and I sat next to two awards on projects I had worked on."
Right. Exactly.
so, so
Yes.
so I should have brought them in with me and said, "Let's negotiate my fee."
Yeah, exactly. I've paid my dues, and there's my validation,
Do you
right?
want another one of these?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, it's, as I'm always saying it is, be careful what you seed because that will grow. So
Hmm,
seed the good intent, water and nurture it. Don't pluck at it as it grows. Wait until it comes to fruition before you pick it. But make sure that what you are actually planting is something that's going to serve your tomorrows. They're
sure
going
thing.
to support your todays. And if you believe in yourself, which is a journey in itself, getting to that belief, getting into I really am not bad. Well, I actually kind of really like that about me. And, this is something I can love about me. And it's a step, it's this journey, it's a stage, it's an involvement. But when you get to that certain level, again, with
Hmm,
a certain frequency of good vibrations, you then exude that love and that confidence of everything you are and what you do out to the world. And then people want whatever it is your content is because
yeah.
they want to feel like that too. When Harry met Sally, the the scene
I
and that I want what she's having.
Yes. Another movie which I is there a movie list that you have that you add to that you recommend to people here? But Sarah, this takes us right back to the beginning of this conversation about me quitting drinking.
Hmm.
It is we are surrounded. I believe this. We're so often surrounded by small choices that are
Hmm.
easy to make. Feel good in the short term, but in the long term, don't
Yes,
work for us. And if
right.
you flip it round, because somebody said, "Oh, of course, you don't want to drink anymore, do you?" I was like, "You must be joking."
Yeah.
Sometimes I sit here and I think, "Oh, nice." Or even not even a nice bottle of wine, a crappy bottle of wine would be perfectly adequate at this time.
Vinegar.
but vinegar would be more than welcome. But you make the slightly tricky decision, small decision now, and it pays off in the long term.
Yes,
And I'm
because it
sure that
gathers. Yeah.
yeah, it's small accumulation over a long time. And I'm sure loads of people have that where they go, "I'll keep the peace. I won't say anything." And before you know it, you've ossified yourself into a terrible situation
Yes.
where you're going, "How the hell do I get out of this?"
Right. Much harder to get out, folks. Been there, done that, got grey hairs to say that. Much harder to get out of a situation because you were busy going, no, it's okay, I can handle this. No, it's not their fault. Or no, no, it's okay. And you keep talking yourself into it until you realize, oh my God, my back is up against the wall. And now
Mm,
what do I do? And that's that is when it is comes to a point that you get down on your knees or you punch back, whatever the case is. But yeah, you have to look at it and go, our life is our choice. We don't always choose what happens to us, but we
mm,
do choose how we react to it. And we're going to have an initial reaction of fear, anger, distraught, or despair, or whatever the case might be. Feel the emotion. Yes, you're absolutely validated in feeling that emotion, but
mm.
don't become the emotion because you can't
Yeah,
think clearly if you become that emotion. It is then take your deep breath and where am I now? And I'm sure you've had this on stage. You've had the perfect skit. It worked perfectly at all the other gigs. And at this one, it ain't going down. And
yeah.
it's like, do you walk off? Do you get angry at the tomatoes being thrown at you, which now seems to be the thing for performers to throw things at people? Um, or do you just take that deep breath and go, okay, redirect. I'm going to do a different skit midway. I don't care.
That's the thing. I always keep my mouth open during a performance in case somebody throws something and it's alcohol. And then it's off me. It's not my fault.
I didn't do it.
The 13th step.
Yes. And yes, and just because you have given something up and you do feel better and your life is better for it, that doesn't mean you don't, you know, don't miss it,
Mm,
right? But what you don't miss Is it being the driver of your ship? That, that he's got the hands on the wheels. You've got the hands firmly on the wheels now.
Yeah. I look at my life and go, wow, this is, you can't see it now because I'm in pitch black again. Um, you go, wow, this is the flat that not drinking built.
Yes, yes,
And
yeah,
I went from being practically homeless, to uh, no in, no investments, no pensions, no nothing, no property. And within 3 years of quitting drinking, I was walking through the front door of this flat,
yes,
and
exactly.
and I look around it, and it looks out over a park, and the neighbours are nice, and it's close to a tube. Uh, which if
Underground
you're not
folks.
if you're not in London, if you're not in London, you need to be near a tube,
Yes,
and
you
then
do.
London opens up. But yeah, shop around the corner, doctor on hand who turns out to be very nice.
Oh,
I'm
you're
surrounded by
lucky. They're not
parks,
on strike.
and bless them. They some of them are, but they are operating a skeleton service. Thankfully, not my skeleton.
Yes. Oh, yes. No, I have brother and sister over there. Believe me, I've been hearing all about it. And of course, when I arrive, there is absolutely no guarantee that the trains aren't going to be on strike. So, yeah, I might be thumbing a ride from the airport.
It's yes, that's Brexit for you. It's
Yes.
the sunlit uplands. We hold all the cards. We can we can send our own. We can put our own people on strike. We don't have to copy the French.
Right, exactly. Well, it kind of reminds me Brexit because my sister was for Brexit and she's a meatarian, and my brother was against Brexit and he's a vegan. So they are
Right.
completely on opposites on humor, on lifestyles, on absolutely everything. But he has saved her life and vice versa back. It's like the total opposites. And it's
Purim must be fun in your house.
yeah. So when I go to see them, I'll be doing certain things with my sister that will be on that level, and then when I go to my brothers, it's jeans and woolies or t-shirt, depending what the weather is going to be like, and it'll be vegan food, lots of walks searching for apple pie or pain raison.
Well, I hope you can swing by me when you're coming through.
Where are you?
I'm in London. I'm in Brixton.
Okay, so she's in Beckenham. I'm not sure how far that distance is.
Beckenham is round the corner.
Then we'll have to
Yeah,
do that. Definitely.
absolutely.
Definitely. And of course, you got referred to me by Stephen Gideon,
Mhm.
whom I interviewed some time ago. And actually, I make references of other people's shows during a show because they're apropos. And, like he was number one criminal for a while there,
Mhm.
and but completely changed his life around to doing lots of great work now. But there was always something that he told me that this was his turning point down to the criminal road. Never mind that the mother gave her up and all of that, but there's that one scene where he was in Ireland during the revolution and he shouldn't have been out and he's 7 years of
Mm.
age and he's watching this young man die who's been shot calling for his mum, and that impact that it had really kind of on decision making. And we never know what something is going to change our story. And, for a while, the story that was written through circumstances was one of violence and one of possibly constantly looking for that kind of nurturing love until he learned to give that nurturing love to himself, not
Mm.
look for it elsewhere. And that's the impact of a story. And I've interviewed quite a number of people that have actually been in jail for one reason or the other. I've actually got one coming up of a woman that was jailed for her brother's crime because they couldn't find the brother.
Right.
Right. So 2 years in jail. Right.
Right. So Purim's going to be particularly tricky at that house.
Yes, well, she hasn't seen him since he's gone on the run. But
I bet.
yes, but she went to jail and just because of association. And so,
Yeah.
but she's a nutritionist, and she said there was no nutrition in there. And she became a Buddhist before she went in. I said, well, you went in and taught soul nutrition. And that was your journey to have, however difficult it was for you. And that's the
Mm.
thing is, what does it mean? Whatever our little cosmic two by fours or nudge, nudge, wink, winks or redirections, what does it mean? And
Mm.
if we learn to find out what it means and change our own story and understand that we have many chapters in our book of life, it isn't about the end. You can't flip in your own book of life to the ending to see how it's going to end because it depends on your actions in each chapter of your life. And whether you are a speaker or a comedian or an actor or a writer, it doesn't matter what you are, right? Own your chapter, own where you're at right now. And whatever
Yeah.
you do, you're going to bring that to the table. but find your inner strength, inner love, inner abundance, and inner purpose, because that will be what will help you get somewhere in life, as it has with you.
It fundamentally choosing, it comes down to a choice and a decision. And you sometimes need to say, where am I? What are my circumstances? What is the decision that lies before me? And how does the decision I make, what does that say about me?
Mm-hmm.
What does that say
Yes,
about me?
yes.
And
And
sometimes you have to do something that's very in character, and sometimes you think I should do something that's very out of character. And that decision can often be the change point that people make. And when you realize you have decisions,
mm-hmm.
that's when you become a grown up, and that's when you take charge of yourself and
Yes.
your life.
I like so many people that have taken that road and now
Mm.
taken charge of their life, and they were willing to go through that process of their own recovery, their own self-discovery after who they really are. I always draw an analogy of we're each given a gifted instrument to play. It's up to us to learn how to play it. And yes, we could be soloists, but when we decide to join an orchestra and each in our own strengths play harmoniously together, now we're transcending into a symphony. So, but it's up to us what our instrument is and how to play it.
You said that to me as a bass guitar player. See, I sit at the back, looking cool, underpinning everything.
Exactly.
They
The
have
heartbeat of it, right?
the
Yes.
heartbeat of it.
Yes, it is. And that's the thing, is that even the triangulist has an important role in may not be in every piece, but
Yeah.
the whole thing is that what music are you to the world? And how is it going to inspire? How is it going to invite? How is it going to help somebody else on their journey of life? And so your skill is to teach people how to actually navigate themselves on
Mm.
stage in presentation, right? And that is so important. You've written your book, right? And now you want to go and do the speaker circuit, or you've got a course or a whole wonderful program. You want to tell people about it. The last thing they
Well,
need is for you to go out there and go blah 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 blah. We want you to
yeah.
tell a story about it,
Exactly.
and
Um,
that's what you do. So how do you help people with that?
so how do I help people? I do it through my writing. I've got a book on storytelling, which I've just produced. I've got a book out on it's called Insider Secrets of Public Speaking. But as I say, we're rewriting it, we're retitling it. So it's going to be called Insider Secrets of Professional Speakers.
Mm.
Because we've worked with professional speakers now for so long, we're like, learn from the best.
Yes.
So I would pop that on your wish list. The only way to get the storytelling book is to find me on LinkedIn. And if you can do that, find me on LinkedIn, Ian Hawkins. I will get a copy to you one way or another.
And
That sounded mildly threatening, and it wasn't supposed to.
you will have this book.
You will have this book, whether you like it or not. I'll smash down the door of your apartment in Des Moines.
No, I actually used to know somebody.
Yeah.
I didn't know him, but he was part of a network group and in network marketing. And he would say, "You're going to go knock on some people's houses. You're going to go in there, and you're not going to leave unless they sign up." And oh my God, that's criminal. What?
Oh.
And
What
I
you'll
go,
get is hopefully you'll get a copy of my book either as a PDF or just flopping through your letterbox in a charming little envelope with a sticker on it, so
wonderful.
you know it's from me.
Now, is that the storytelling is your superpower?
Yeah, storytelling is your superpower is the book, um, and Insider Secrets of Public Speaking is the speaking book.
Right.
So I would recommend that you get it on Kindle, and when it comes out, the second edition, 10-year anniversary, then you can spring into action and get the only difference between the two is likely to be more stuff about how to be on Zoom meetings.
Right. Yes. And of course, that became, I was doing Zoom before
Yeah.
BC, before COVID. But yes, it became, a now very used thread for that, because we can bridge the gap from around the world, which is wonderful. But
It,
there is a different style, a different etiquette, a different everything else to do with it, right?
it's totally different. And what it's done is because everyone said, well, that's the end of the events industry. And no, it's not, because
No.
people have realized that people need people. You need to put people in a room.
Yes.
And webinars and Zoom meetings are fantastic for talking to somebody for 20 minutes, 30 minutes in Australia or in America or in, Paris or wherever. But if you actually want to have a connection, if you want to build a relationship with them, you do have to go and press the flesh. You have
Yes.
to meet them face to face, and you have to talk nonsense over a glass of something cold and, in the middle of a conference.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, that human connection. But we make a
yeah,
vibrational connection here, but that human connection can only be found when you're actually in person, which is yeah, we mustn't give that up at all. So of course you have your website,
yeah,
Mr-Hawkins, HAWKINS.com,
that's me.
and Ian at Mr-Hawkins.com, Instagram, um,
At
smart,
Smart Mr. Hawkins. Does that sound conceited?
confident,
Confident.
not conceited, confident.
Smart
Um,
Mr. Hawkins.
and of course, you're on Threads and you're on Twitter and LinkedIn. It's just your name, Ian
Yeah,
R.
Ian R.
Hawkins.
Hawkins. Yeah, but you'll recognize me. I'm the scruffy looking bloke with a rainbow background.
Why the rainbow background?
It's I was coming back from an event in Birmingham, and I thought, oh, I should update my selfie. And there was a really nice piece of graffiti up there, and it happened to be quite rainbowish. And I thought, oh, it'd be a bit of color on LinkedIn. And I took a snap, and I looked at it. I thought the light was good. I look ruggedly handsome. Now that does not happen every day.
When it's a good shot, yes.
I
Don't
was
rock
like,
the boat.
my hair is on point. I come from a client event, so I look quite smart. I thought, I'm going to run with this. I think this is serendipitous.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I look a
that
bit
moment.
tasty.
Yeah, and those little moments in life that count, which is really, really important, and it captures something, doesn't it? Which is great, and
Yes,
that is
that's you with your portrait in the attic, Sarah.
yeah, yes. But I think, there's so many ways that we've got to look at how we introduce ourselves. No, I always
Hmm,
say if people want to get to know you, podcast is a great way to do that because you're unraveling the onions and you're never quite going to know what you're going to find on the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. And so when I say if you want to know what a person's like, listen to one of the interviews they've done.
hmm.
And you'll know if it's what I call a sterile interview, question answer, and there's the connection, or whether it's a conversational one where they feel they can let their hair down and relax and reveal.
Let's say letting it down. You can't tell if I've let it down.
I'll send you some of mine.
Obliged, thank you.
So this has been absolutely great. I've totally enjoyed it. And so, if people want help, and then they can reach out to you. They've got the books, but they can also reach out to you via email or just go to the site first.
But find me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's where I do all my chit
Right.
chat. It's where I talk to people. It's my preferred social media platform,
Yes.
and frankly, it's where I hang out most. So if you want a quick answer, that's better than almost anywhere else.
Right. Yes. LinkedIn and Facebook are my two different ones there that I interact with. Right. Others
Yeah,
post, but these are the interactions. So,
yeah.
and that's something that's really important, folks, whether you are online or whether you are in person, is please dress respectfully for the association, for what the event is about, but please always dress as you. The if you are a jeans and shirt guy, then go in jeans and shirt. Make sure they're clean and well and crisp, and that's who you are. Don't suddenly put on an Armani suit and you're fidgeting and this and that because then people are distracted and they don't get to know you. Please always be confident enough to present yourself. And if people don't get you, they don't get you. That's okay. There's somebody else there. And that's the important thing, right? And if you get booed off the stage the first time, okay, they just weren't your audience. And maybe you have to fine tune what it is you're presenting. Don't give up, redirect.
Yeah. Did you want me to jump in there? Actually, you look like that was your take care of each other. Take care of yourselves and each other. Your Jerry Springer closer, Sarah.
I'm all about redirection. You have to be flexible. What would your tree be if you were a tree?
What my tree be? I quite like a weeping willow. quite like them because they tend to be near water. They offer nice shade and they're interactive.
I am a willow tree as well. In fact, I will be buried under a willow tree, my little ashes helping them grow. I love the willow because strong roots, strong trunk, but I love the flexibility of the branches. They dance, they go with the flow of life. They're not rigid. They're not going to easily break. They offer shelter, but they offer, arms and hugs and everything else. And they're
I,
beautiful when they move.
I would, in that case, I will give you a song to put on as soon as I'm gone, which is Joan Armatrading Willow. It's like all Joan Armatrading songs, it is beautiful.
Ah, yes, I've got to listen to that one. But yes, a willow tree, you go with the flow in life. And isn't that, not all personality types can do that, but I'm grateful that I am one of those personality types. And that doesn't mean I'm not shit scared when I do it, or that I even know what it is I'm doing. But I'm putting that one foot in front of the other in exploration and just to see what happens. And, sometimes, yes, it's a pothole, right? And I've learned how to get out of those now. But it's just be willing to explore, be exploratory in life, be wondrous in life. You have no idea if you can do it until you try. And so it doesn't matter what age you are, you could be a speaker at anything, anywhere. Maybe you're a church speaker, maybe you're just a speaker of your association, but you want to be someone that captures people. And there is a technique to that. You bring you with the technique together, you'll be unstoppable.
So I hope you'll come and see me when you go to Beckenham because Brixton
Yes.
is just up the road and you'll be very welcome.
My brother will be coming over for a few days before taking me down, and we'll come together and meet up with you because he knows the area better than I do. I've been out of the UK way too long. So
There's a vegan restaurant right across the way to me.
perfect. Absolutely
We're on.
perfect. No excuses. We're there.
No excuse.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ian. This has been absolutely great. And to everyone else out there, whether you are a speaker or a storyteller or whatever the importance is just be willing to take that journey and explore. Don't say, oh, I can never do that, because you don't know until you try. And when you find something you really want to talk about, all you need is a little technique to know how. Then it'll come across as that inspiration to beget that invitation. So thank you, Ian. And to everyone else out there, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tab at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.